Tonight in the Champions League, it's Bruges against Rangers as the Scottish champions continue their bid to reach the European Cup final. That's followed by snooker at the British Open continues from Derby, Watana against Drago at 11:40. But John Greaves with me for Champions League football. Rangers against Bruges, 40 minutes.
Edward Woodward is McCall and he's got a kidnapping to solve in the equaliser at 12:30.
Headquarters of ITN, News at 10, with Trevor McDonald.
Major tells the doommongers, stop talking Britain down. 5 questioned tonight after raids by bomb police. Serbian soldiers benefit, but the airdrops will continue. Gary Lineker shrugs off the challenge of soccer in Japan. Good evening. The Prime Minister hit out at the doommongers today. He said they were talking Britain down and damaging our trade prospects. The picture they tried to paint of a nation in decline was utterly false, Mr. Major said, and unrealistic. A Treasury report today painted a relatively bright economic picture. It listed stronger retail sales, the highest order books for 2 years, car sales recovering, and house prices stabilizing. The pound strengthened again against the mark and the dollar today, and the 100 index surged 36 points to a new record high. Here's our political editor, Michael Bronson.
The Downing Street view of life, where Mr. Major was offering further help to the Polish economy today, is that our own is now showing distinct signs of recovery. But having himself signalled several false economic dawns in the past, the Prime Minister wants others, like the city dealers who marked the pound up and sent share prices soaring today, to make the point for him. But unemployment is still climbing, as it always does long after recessions end, a point the CBI was underlining today. So Mr. Major's concerned at the gap between the good news he sees and the bad which he says the opposition parties and the media harp on.
Messages of gloom by themselves don't matter. But when those messages of gloom knock Britain and then damage our prospects as a trading nation, then they do matter. And the fact of the matter is that what the pessimists say is not true and ought not to go unchallenged.
There was in fact a deliberate get-off-your-backsides campaign today, with Michael Heseltine echoing the Prime Minister's words about not getting lazy about export markets, especially in North America, just because things here might be getting easier.
We have some of the world's best companies, some of the world's best products. What we have to do is to encourage more of our companies to go further and faster into the export market.
The opposition, though, isn't buying all this. In marginal Basildon tonight, one Labour says on Tory promises now being broken, Gordon Brown rejected John Major's stop talking Britain down approach.
I say that blaming the people, this is now the last desperate refuge of a Prime Minister whose policies are now discredited.
Out and about in Basildon, not too many take the Prime Minister's line about Britain either.
He said everyone's running it down, but I mean, there's not a lot to run up at the moment, is there?
You try telling people around here to think positively and they will say, well, we are thinking that positively it will not get better yet.
One local businessman, though, who runs a fleet of taxis, says things are starting to improve.
I personally feel that my very small light at the end of the tunnel is now getting a little bit larger. Not a lot, but it is getting better, and I feel that there is a fraction more money around now than what there has been for a long time.
But Mr. Major knows that until consumers in the high street are convinced that a recovery is underway, then the gloom will probably continue. Meantime, he is determined to try and make certain that what good news there is gets through. Witness figures tomorrow which will show that car sales last month were 16% higher than the figure for a year ago. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Scotland Yard said this evening that last night's raid on a house in North London uncovered enough explosives to make a dozen bombs. 8 more people have been arrested since 2 suspected IRA bombers were picked up last night. Tonight, a total of 5 are still being questioned. Robin White has our report.
Police have spent the day conducting house-to-house inquiries in North London. Forensic teams have also been examining other addresses raided in a coordinated operation. A total of 10 people were initially taken into custody, several of them picked up on the platform of this North London tube station. This afternoon, 5 were released without charge. A car was also taken away to be examined. Much of the detectives' information came as a result of a detailed examination of the North London house, in which 2 people were arrested yesterday. Detectives searching that house say they also found at least 20 pounds of high explosives, firearms and a quantity of bomb-making equipment. The 2 men arrested there are being questioned about the blast outside Harrods in January, when a bomb exploded in a litter bin, injuring 3 people. They were picked up following a tip-off, after Scotland Yard released a video of 2 men seen outside the store just before the explosion, who they were trying to identify.
Tonight, 5 people are still being held under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Police say their inquiries are continuing. Robin White, News at 10, Central London.
Downing Street confirmed tonight that Norma Major was in a hotel where a gunman was on the loose. She booked into the Hyatt Hotel in Birmingham 10 days ago, but had left to go to a function when a man waving a gun was seen in a corridor. He was arrested, and it turned out that the gun wasn't loaded. Downing Street said it was absolute tosh to suggest that the gunman's presence was anything to do with Mrs. Major. In Texas, the waiting goes on. The religious cult leader David Koresh hasn't kept his promise to give himself up. He now says he's waiting for God to tell him what to do. A British official at the scene has a list of 26 Britons who could still be inside. ITN's Bill Neely is there.
They're edging closer all the time. Federal agents swooping low over the compound today. Armoured personnel carriers nearby. One just feet from the main building. Bedlam at a news conference today. The FBI announcing they won't risk using force again.
We're not contemplating assaulting that compound at all. The idea is to get them out safely, and that's the goal here. And that will be the British people will have the same treatment.
The cult leader David Koresh told the FBI he hadn't surrendered as promised because God had told him to wait.
Koresh refused to honor his promise and has indicated he will keep his promise to come out when he receives further instruction from God.
More ambulances arrived at the compound today, where it's now known 110 people remain, including 20 children. 2 women left last night and were immediately charged with conspiracy to murder. One is 75 and nearly blind, the other 77. In another car, the 3rd British child to be released. Natalie Noborega from North London was freed on her 11th birthday. Her mother, Teresa, is still in the compound. The Foreign Office has a list of 26 Britons who relatives fear are also inside. The FBI now says Sunday's raid that left 22 officers dead or wounded was betrayed by an informant who tipped off the cult members that they'd be attacked. It's a story that has the world's attention and, it appears, box office appeal.
There have been more than one inquiries by Hollywood producers into this story.
Hollywood agents have tried to contact the cult leader in the compound to offer him money for the film rights. Tonight, it could be called the waiting game, the arrival of mobile homes for federal agents, suggesting that the wait may be a long one. And just as a footnote to this violent story, the FBI also said that in 1991, the number of people who died by gunfire in this state alone was 3,692. This is the only state in America in which more people were shot dead than died in car accidents. This is Bill Neely for News at 10, live in Waco, Texas.
Here, the former Defence and Trade Minister Alan Clark is not to be prosecuted over his inconsistent evidence about how much the government knew of plans to break the embargo on arms sales to Iraq. Labour's Robin Cook accused the government of a cover-up, saying it had dropped charges because Mr Clark's evidence would have implicated ministers. The Crown Prosecution Service said it dropped the charges because it couldn't tell which of Mr. Clark's statements were true and which weren't.
I was always confident that I was innocent.
Were you ever visited by the police or questioned by the police?
No, no.
So were you surprised then by the Crown Prosecution decision today?
No.
There's been a breakthrough tonight in the UN plan to bring peace to Bosnia. Bosnia's Muslim government has finally signed the demobilization agreement, which Serbia and Croatia signed in January. Also tonight, the UN Security Council is putting together a statement demanding that Serbian troops stop their offensive in eastern Bosnia. President Bill Clinton said today airdrops to the area would continue. But is the aid hitting its targets? ITN's Jeffrey Archer reports.
This is the first pictorial evidence of what's happened to the humanitarian aid dropped in Bosnia by the US Air Force. These ration packs, intended for Muslims cut off by Serbs since April, are now helping to feed Serb soldiers who've overrun the area. The pictures shot by a Serb cameraman also show ruins on the outskirts of Chaska, a town where hundreds of Muslims were reported to be massacred when the Serbs took control. Last night, 4 more US transports flew from Frankfurt, with ITN on one of them, as concern as to who's getting the supplies cast fresh doubt over the air operation. 7 of these boxes contain meals ready to eat, the American Army rations, which are wrapped in plastic and can withstand the impact when they're dropped from 2 miles up. The 8th box contains medical supplies, which are equally unbreakable.
Green light!
With cabin lights dimmed to red, 6 tons of supplies were dumped into the darkness. Reports from Bosnia said fierce fighting had prevented the hungry from collecting the food. After suggestions today that they would stop the aid flights, the Americans announced that they'd continue, egged on by the Russians sending 2 planes soon to join the US operation.
Hunger is the enemy of everybody. So anybody that comes here to help this is going to join the team, and we're going to do it together. I don't feel we'd be in a competition whatsoever.
The Americans have demonstrated their will to do more in Bosnia. What they still hope to prove is that what they're doing is worthwhile. Jeffrey Archer, News at 10, Frankfurt.
It's emerged from Westminster tonight that the Prime Minister is about to unveil sweeping changes to the honours system. Our political correspondent Jackie Ashley has more. Jackie?
Well, Trevor, what we've learnt tonight is that John Major will be announcing his plans on the honours system to the MPs tomorrow. The changes are going to be gradual rather than dramatic. Basically, there's going to be an end to the idea that people who've done a job for a long time, such as permanent secretaries in the civil service, will automatically receive an honour. From now on, honours will be given for public service, but they'll be based more on merit than on the number of years someone spent in a certain job.
And will the new system take into account the criticisms in the past that the honours system tended to be class-based?
Yes, it will. Mr Major has made much of his idea of a classless society, and he believes the present system reflects the class system too closely. For example, in the army, only commissioned officers, such as lieutenants and colonels, can receive the military cross. Non-commissioned officers only receive the military medal. All those distinctions are going to go. So again, from now on, the honours which are given, which will be the same honours, will be based on a person's service rather than on their rank or their class in society.
Jackie Ashley, thank you very much. A verdict of suicide was recorded today on Lady Green, the estranged wife of the disgraced former Director of Public Prosecutions, Sir Alan Green. She was found dead in her London flat at the end of January. Sir Alan, who resigned after police caught him talking to a prostitute, wasn't at the hearing. Norman Rees reports.
The inquest heard that Sir Alan and Lady Green had separated last year after difficulties in their marriage. Her son Robin said that recently his mother had seemed a little more positive about life and was planning a holiday. He last saw Lady Green at her home the night before her death. She seemed tired and a little subdued. When he went to the house the next day, he found a note from his mother. In it, she described what she intended to do and where he would find her. Her body was lying across the bed. A plastic bag had been placed over her head, secured at the neck by an elastic band. The pathologist told the court Lady Green had taken an overdose of tranquilizers, but these had not been enough to kill her. She died of suffocation. Coroner Dr. Paul Knappman said Lady Green had appeared on the outside to be portraying a more positive attitude, but it was clear that her personal problems affected her a great deal. Lady Green's son Robin was the only family member to attend the inquest. Norman Rees, News at 10, Westminster Coroner's Court.
Next tonight, the embryo scheme, which could end the misery for childless couples. Focus on Britain asks, are British designers dedicated to following the fashion the public really wants? And as millionaire Lineker tackles the Japanese language, his paymasters spell out the bottom line.
Logo? Very expensive.
A pioneer in test tube baby technology forecast today that by the end of the decade, fertility problems will be a thing of the past. Nearly every woman who wants a child will be able to have one. The key to that breakthrough will be persuading enough fertile women to give embryos or eggs. A national centre to match donors with would-be parents opened in Manchester today. Our science editor Lawrence McGuinty has the report.
Andrea and Tom Gray have a perfectly normal family, except that Daniel, who's 3, was born from a donated egg fertilised by his father's sperm. So was his brother Joel. Andrea has a genetic disease. She had no chance of having children until the donor eggs came along.
There are an awful lot of women out there who would jump at the chance, but they just don't know.
Test tube embryos for donation can be frozen, but eggs can't, so there's a desperate need for more donors. Taking eggs involves a simple operation, and before that, drugs to stimulate the ovaries to produce eggs. Donors must be under 35 and healthy. They're screened for AIDS. They're not paid.
I'm very squeamish, and if I can do it, anybody can. There's not a lot involved, and it's the most wonderful gift that you could give to give somebody a child.
This woman, who wishes to remain anonymous, is still waiting for a donor.
It's a very special technology, and it's a very special chance for people like me who really have no other way at all of bearing a child.
Doctors running the new centre in Manchester say many women just don't know that donors are needed.
There's an urgent need to tell women and to really to educate the public at large and women in particular about the need to donate eggs.
Thousands of families are waiting for donors to bring them the happiness Daniel and Joel brought to the Greys. Lawrence McGuinty, News at 10, Manchester.
The Yorkshire Regional Health Authority has just reported that the Hillsborough soccer disaster victim Tony Bland died tonight in his hospital bed in Keighley. Doctors were given consent by the law lords last month to stop feeding him. There was said to be no possibility that he would ever recover consciousness. This report by Howell Jones.
Tony Bland, as his parents want to remember him, a teenager who lived for soccer before consciousness was crushed out of him at Hillsborough. On that day in 1989, Tony arrived early for the FA Cup semi-final, simply hoping to see his team, Liverpool, beat Nottingham Forest. But in the disaster that followed, he was trapped between a metal barrier and a surge of hundreds of fans. His lungs were punctured, his brain irreparably damaged. For nearly 4 years he existed in what doctors call a persistent vegetative state, or PVS, unable to think, move or speak, kept alive only by an artificial feeding tube. For Tony's parents it was torture. Through the long years of nursing, they never received any sign from their only son that he knew they were watching over him. Alan and Barbara Bland kept up the routine of daily visits to their son's bedside, but began a legal fight to allow him to die. Last month, the High Court ruled doctors could remove Tony's feeding tube, a historic legal precedent which has given hope to the families of other PVS sufferers.
Other news. Ian Maxwell avoided being made a bankrupt today by handing over £500,000 to the Mirror Pension Fund, money taken by his father. Mr. Maxwell's lawyers handed over the money 5 minutes after a court case against him was due to begin. His brother Kevin was declared bankrupt last September. Albert Sabin, the inventor of the oral vaccine for polio, has died at the age of 86. The World Health Organization called him one of the great medical researchers of the century. And Canadian press reports that Ben Johnson has been caught using drugs again aren't true, athletics officials said today. Johnson was banned for drug taking after the Seoul Olympics. Tonight's focus on Britain is on fashion. London Fashion Week begins tomorrow, a rather small-scale affair compared to what it once was. many of our best designers will not be there. The industry has shrunk, hit like everything else by the recession. Some designers say the industry should get government help, as in other countries. In Cutting Their Cloth, tonight's focus on Britain, we asked whether fashion houses would make more money if they concentrated more on clothes with mass market appeal. Our reporter is Tim Ewan.
You either have to be 6 foot tall or, made like a pencil.
It's very difficult to get a size 16. And if you do get a size 14, you have to squeeze yourself in it.
The flares and the hippie styles, I've been there, done that, worn the T-shirt 20 years ago.
It's the age-old dilemma, the relationship between catwalk and high street. And as Britain's fashion industry continues to decline, it's more important than ever.
If you said to a designer, do you know that half of the population in Britain is over 40, they'd look at you in stunned silence. And certainly when you talk to designers in terms of sizing, they're not aware that, again, half of the female population in Britain is over a size 14.
The face of fashion is young and slim. The style of the moment, designer grunge, represents a rejection of smart 80s consumerism.
Cheeky hilarity is the order today.
Yes. But some of the new designers know survival depends on reaching a broader market. This outfit is the work of Paul Frith, a former Royal Marine, inspired by the films of Alfred Hitchcock.
I'm trying to be almost boring because then I think more people will like it and not go out of hand. And I'm not breaking new ground by any means, but just doing lines.
At stores like Harrods, £700 jackets still attract the well-heeled, but only a third of the high-fashion clothes here are the work of domestic designers. Lack of talent isn't a problem for the British fashion industry. Keeping it is. All too often, the brightest and the best are forced abroad because of the lack of opportunities here.
The great design studios of the rest of the world are staffed with English graduates of our English design colleges.
Some high fashion stores keep the faith. Josephine Turner, who's from Spain, proudly displays British designs she believes are unrivaled.
Look how beautiful is all the little beads in wood.
And how much are they?
£1,295.
1,295
Yes, but all this is hand embroidered. Look how many tiny little beads there are there.
Designers know that as well as setting trends, they must appeal to a market that extends beyond the young and the beautiful. This week's London show won't compete with Paris or Milan. Too many big buyers are staying away. But designers say that only government backing can help them compete abroad and put the smile back on the face of British fashion. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Central London.
In the 60s, the industry employed 750,000 people. Now it's heading below 200,000. Soccer news, Paul Gascoigne has been given a one-match ban for being sent off on Sunday. He was shown the red card for a tussle with a defender. It was his first sending off in 2 years. And finally, with the Japanese soccer season due to kick off in 3 months' time, Lineker, formerly of Spurs and England, is well into training with his new Grampus 8 teammates. Not in Nagoya, because Lineker keeps getting mobbed by his new fans there. So to escape Gary Mania, the team has gone to Tasmania. Mark Austin reports.
At the bottom of the world, preparing for a new season with a new team. England's favourite footballing son. And Gary Lineker's trying to get to grips with more than just his fitness. The Japanese team, Grampus 8, are in Tasmania seeking refuge from the constant media attention dogging their star striker. They're forking out £2.5 million over 2 years for his services, but they say he's cheap at the price.
He makes good gold, so many gold. It's very cheap. No gold, very expensive. What do you think?
I'm not worried about the play and the pressure. Obviously, I enjoy that in a funny sort of way. Helps to motivate.
Motivated too when it comes to learning the new language. An hour a day with a teammate.
今週の土曜日は何日ですか?
She speaks good Japanese, especially pronunciation. Yeah, it's very good.
You learn that the Japanese are always very polite. Very polite.
Mark Austin, News at 10, Tasmania.
And it's sayonara too from us. That's News at 10 tonight. From all of us here, until tomorrow, good night.
Hello, good evening. Well, after yet another bitterly cold day, you'll be glad to know there is a slow change afoot, all due to this high pressure slowly edging over the country, hand in hand with milder conditions coming down from the north. A slight hiccup, though, with a rain-bearing front up there to the far northwest. Now, looking ahead to the weekend, and we see that high pressure more or less slap-bang in charge over the country there, and really that means it'll keep the fronts at bay and more or less settle conditions for most of us. Now back to tonight, mainly a dry night in the offing. We see some wet snow over the hilltops there and a slight problem with freezing fog to the east of Scotland and possibly Northern Ireland, so do watch out for that. Now further south there's a lot of cloud around and that ought to tend to keep temperatures up. So as we go into tomorrow, we do so on a much brighter note than of late. Even so, we've got some cloud and ranges creeping into the very far northwest, but that cloud down to the southwest, well, this ought to tend to lift during the morning. As the afternoon ticks by, we see that cloud spilling down into the east of Scotland and piling up down the western side of the country. Still a brighter, cheerier end to the day than of late. This is very much reflected in those temperatures, 6s, even 7s in the odd fortunate place. That's 45 Fahrenheit, so a good few degrees higher than the chilly temperatures we've experienced recently.
Tonight, the rotting flats that residents fear are damaging their health. Angry egg producers say salmonella checks wasted millions of pounds. And we uncover secret film of Britain's first space rocket. Good evening. Residents of a block of flats at Alton say their health is suffering because of damp in their homes. Carpets have been ruined, wallpaper has fallen off and clothing has been damaged. Now they're demanding to be moved. Kerry Swain reports.
Every day Michael Harding puts newspaper on his bedroom floor to soak up the water. He threw away the rotten carpet long ago. His clothes are covered in mould. All 4 people living in the flat are ill. Mr. Harding has bronchitis. His sister Doris suffers from asthma and their friend John Westbrook is in and out of hospital with serious heart and lung trouble. Neighbour June Hammett sleeps in the lounge to escape the damp. She says her asthma is getting steadily worse. Upstairs, Julia Muller's wallpaper is falling off in sheets, black with mould. All live in the same block of council flats in Jenner Way on the Manor Estate at Alton. They say they've been complaining about the damp for years.
Water just runs off the actual wall and the floors. When it rains, it's absolutely like a river in here.
I think the flats are in poor condition. The damp that I've seen in 2 of these flats has been particularly, I think, unacceptable.
We've commissioned 2 independent surveys, the second of which has actually arrived today, so it's hot off the press. But I'm already able, happily, to report to residents that it has been narrowed down purely to condensation.
Waterlogged, wet, damp, subsidence, floors dropping away. No, I will not agree with that.
We're not cutting corners, and if we find that we've got structural problems on any of our properties, then we will put it right.
But the tenants say that's not good enough. They say their health is suffering and they want dry homes now.
Almost 200 job losses have been announced in Dorset today. The Wimborne company Flight Refuelling, which makes equipment for military and civil aircraft, is to shed 115 jobs, about a tenth of its workforce. And the insurance group Mutual Municipal is making 60 staff at its Bournemouth office redundant over the next 9 months. An inquest at Southampton has been told a baby was found hanging from his cot after his babysitter went to a disco. The boy's mother, Natalie Weller, said she left her 23-month-old son Stephen with a 14-year-old girl whom she'd used and trusted. The girl said she went to a church disco for less than an hour. When she returned to the flat at Thornhill, Stephen was dangling from the neck of his jumper. The coroner recorded a verdict of accidental death. Nearly 100 detainees at a Hampshire prison are on hunger strike. The men at Haslar Jail in Gosport are protesting about delays in dealing with their requests for political asylum. Some have been locked up waiting for an answer from the Home Office for over a year. They come from all over the world, and many say they'd be killed if they were sent home. Police have released a computer-enhanced picture of a man who's threatened bank and building society staff with a bomb. He's raided several building societies in Bournemouth and Poole. In each incident, he hands a note to staff and threatens to detonate a device. Egg producers in the south have been told they don't need to carry out any more checks following the salmonella scare. Thousands of chickens were slaughtered, millions of pounds wasted, and farmers driven out of business after the incident. Now the egg producers are angry, saying checks on their flocks were a complete waste of time. Aidan Pickering explains.
Eggs have steadily worked their way back onto household shopping lists following the scare 4 years ago. A careless phrase.
Most of the egg production of this country, sadly, is now infected with salmonella.
And egg sales dropped by 50%. In turn, an estimated 50,000 commercial producers went out of business. But egg producers are furious at the way they've been treated since. They've had to carry out regular checks on their flocks to see if they're infected. The Ministry of Agriculture has slaughtered more than 3 million hens at a cost of £5 million to the taxpayer. No infections here, but the testing is costly.
It's cost us about £500 a year to test on the size flocks that we've got, and it's certainly inconvenient in both time and stress to the birds.
But the Ministry has announced testing is now no longer required. It was in response to an independent report on salmonella in eggs. It says the number of organisms eggs contain when laid is very low. And with no more testing, it's hoped more farmers may be encouraged back into egg production.
A small reel of film which shows the test firing of a secret space rocket on the Isle of Wight has been discovered after almost 40 years. Black Knight was Britain's first research rocket. In 1957, it was a secret project aimed at putting Britain ahead in the space race. This footage was found recently after being locked away and forgotten about. The rocket was taken on a low loader to the site on the western tip of the island. It was put into the gantry and made ready to fire, but it never left the launch pad. Eventually it was moved to Australia and fired into space, but the project fizzled out through lack of money. Some soccer news. Brighton earned their third successive league victory tonight with a 2-2 draw against Huddersfield. Kurt Nogan scored his 11th goal of the season. Clive Walker in the second half ensured Brighton moves into a playoff place in the second division. And finally, a group of delivery van drivers are celebrating a win of £200,000 in a Spot the Ball competition. The drivers, who work at Robert Horne Paper Merchants at Eastleigh, collected £43,000 each. Congratulations to them. That's all the Meridian News for now. We'll be back during GMTV from 6:15 tomorrow morning. Join us then if you can. Good night.
Good evening. Well, dry and rather cloudy tonight, but there will be some clearer spells, I think, over the next couple of hours. Could push temperatures down to the freezing mark, so a local air frost around. Now, our chart for noon tomorrow shows the high pressure still sitting over the top of us, so a brighter day, but still on the chilly side. The warmer air up over Scotland, and that will be with us as we go into Friday. Tomorrow morning, then, another grey start as we've had the last couple of days, but it will brighten up quicker. Some sunny spells appearing, particularly on the coast, I think, middle to late morning. Into the afternoon, it's patchy cloud and sunny spells. Now, the wind's strong through the morning, but easing down, and just a light wind by the time we come to the end of the day. And your best temperatures tomorrow, up a touch at 7, that's 45. That's all for me now. Sleep well.
Football next. Brian Moore introduces highlights from the third round of the European Champions League.